Betrayed and disowned by family at 16, she rose from nothing. Years later, she stormed their lavish mansion, unveiling truths that shattered their perfect facade. My name is Abigail Langley, and it's been 10 years since my family erased me from their lives as if I had never existed. No phone call, no birthday card, not even a check-in on Thanksgiving. They didn't need to say goodbye, they just made me invisible. I remember the day everything changed so clearly. I was 17, just starting my senior year of high school in Charleston, South Carolina. My mother, Margaret, owned a gold necklace with a pearl pendant, a family heirloom she only wore on special occasions. One Sunday morning, the necklace suddenly disappeared from her jewelry box. I hadn't gone into her room that day. I'd been in the kitchen all morning, helping Uncle Thomas, the only person in the family who had ever been kind to me, make breakfast. But that didn't matter. The moment Margaret realized the necklace was gone, she turned to me with a chilling look of suspicion. "You were the only one home," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to make my chest tighten. "And you've always had a habit of poking around things that don't belong to you." Before I could respond, Charlotte, my older sister, came down the stairs, arms crossed, a smug sparkle in her eyes. "I saw Abigail in Mom's room this morning," Charlotte said, her face unreadable. Maybe it was an accident. An accident? I hadn't stepped foot in Mom's room all week. "I went in there to unplug the hairdryer Charlotte left on," I said, trying to stay calm. "You always told me to double-check that kind of thing before leaving the house." But my mother didn't listen. She didn't need proof. She only needed an excuse to confirm what she'd always believed about me, that I was a mistake. From that day on, I was no longer invited to family dinners. They said I should feel ashamed and keep my distance. My father, Richard, didn't say a word in my defense. He only spoke once during dinner that night, just as I was leaving the kitchen. "Everything good disappears when you're around." I slept alone in the basement, ate separately, and was gradually excluded from every family activity. No one talked to me except Uncle Thomas, and only when no one else was nearby. I wasn't yelled at. I wasn't hit. But the silence, day after day, it was worse than anything. I thought things would change when I got into college. I was accepted to the College of Charleston, not an Ivy League school, but enough to give me hope for a fresh start. But one day, while I was in my dorm, my roommate Hannah shoved her phone screen in front of my face, her eyes filled with confusion. "Have you seen this?" On the screen was an anonymous blog post titled "The Truth About Abigail Langley, the Girl Who Knows How to Manipulate Everything." It was full of baseless accusations, that I faked illnesses for better grades, that I stole from friends, and, of course, that I secretly took my mother's jewelry. There was no author's name, but the language was disturbingly familiar. I knew instantly it was Charlotte. I tried contacting school administrators, hoping to prove the post was slander, but no one listened. "First impressions matter," one professor told me after class. "And you might want to reconsider how you present yourself." That blog post cost me my scholarship for the next semester, a scholarship I had spent 6 months earning through field research on community psychology. My classmates kept their distance. Some professors started calling my name with a cautious tone. I nearly dropped out, but I didn't. I gritted my teeth and pushed through. I worked 3 part-time jobs every week. I lived on instant noodles and powdered coffee. I studied in the library until the lights went out. I'm not sure why I kept going. Maybe a part of me still believed that if I became good enough, successful enough, my mother would call. She'd say it was all a misunderstanding, that she was wrong. But that call never came, and I stopped waiting. I graduated college at 22 with a decent GPA, no scholarships, no honors, and not a single congratulatory message from my family. I thought I had left it all behind, the past, the pain, and Charlotte. But I was wrong. 3 years later, while working at a community mental health center in Savannah, Georgia, I got an email from a colleague. "Abigail, have you seen this article? Some parts sound just like the paper you mentioned when you first joined." I opened the attachment. It was a published study in Wellness Frontiers titled "Self-Recovery Behaviors in Psychologically Traumatized Youth." Author, Charlotte Langley. I read every line, and my heart sank. The structure, the citations, the data approach, even the conclusion, it was all my work. I had spent 8 months writing it in the evenings after work. Charlotte couldn't have known those details unless she had the original file. Then I remembered, a year earlier, Charlotte had visited my office. She said she was thinking about switching to a career in mental health and wanted to learn from my experience. I had naively opened my laptop and shared everything, my ongoing topics, community surveys, even unpublished data charts. I thought maybe Charlotte was finally trying to reconnect. I even made her coffee. And once again, I let myself be betrayed. I immediately contacted the journal, demanding they verify the source of the article, but 3 weeks passed with no reply. When I called, the receptionist said flatly, "We are not obligated to disclose our editorial process. If you believe there is a dispute, please pursue it through legal channels." I didn't have a legal team. I didn't have money to hire investigators. But I had my memory, and this time, I wasn't going to stay silent. I began gathering everything: drafts, emails sent to Charlotte, even an audio clip from our meeting. It wasn't long, but enough to prove she had access to my material before the article was published. I printed out every piece of evidence, labeled each folder. But while going through everything, I found something far more serious. In an old bank account I'd opened in college, I saw a series of strange transfers labeled medical consulting, research collaboration fees, specialist support, over $118,000 total, recorded over 2 years during a time I was barely surviving on instant noodles and paying tuition in small installments. The recipient name, Abigail E. Langley. My name. But I had never received a cent of it. I sent the information to an old friend, Daniel, who now works as a forensic accountant. A few days later, he called me back, sounding tense. "Abby, you might be facing a tax investigation. These transactions are linked to an entity called the Langley Family Foundation, but I couldn't find any valid operating license. It's likely a financial front, and worse, they used your tax ID number." I froze. Who registered the account? Not sure yet, but one of the coordinators listed is Margaret Langley. My mother's name. I wanted to deny it, to believe maybe it was a mistake, but deep down, I knew. She never stopped. My mother once told me, "There's no place in this family for someone who tarnishes our image." Now I understood. To her, I wasn't a daughter. I was a threat to control. I reopened the old medical records file. Before my grandfather passed away when I was 15, he told me he had set aside part of an education fund just for me because Abigail is the only one who lives true to her heart. I never received a cent from that fund. Now I knew why. I went through all my old emails, called the law office that once worked with my family. One of the former legal assistants, now retired, agreed to send me a copy of the revised will from 2014. My name had been crossed out, the reason written next to it, no verified blood relation. I started shaking, not out of anger, out of fear, because I knew she had faked a DNA test and used that result to erase me from every legal record of the family. But they forgot one thing: I'm no longer the 17-year-old girl who got silently cast out of her own home. I got the wedding invitation on an April afternoon, just as I was preparing to submit a package of evidence to Daniel's law office. Cream envelope, thick paper, gold trim, and my name, Abigail E. Langley, written in a handwriting I could never forget, my mother's, Margaret. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it, sitting on my kitchen counter like a foreign object, something both distant and haunting. 10 years. 10 years of no calls, no check-ins, and now a wedding invite. I pulled the card from the envelope, my hands going cold like the blood was draining from them. Embossed in glittering print, "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Charlotte Langley and Benjamin T. Caldwell, June 18th at Magnolia Plantation, Charleston." Benjamin Caldwell. It hit me immediately. 7 years ago, I had attended a social impact startup summit in Atlanta. I was there, trying to raise seed money for my first public health initiative. One of the judges that day was Benjamin. He was the young CFO of a private health investment fund, smug, polished, textbook arrogance. When I finished my pitch, he smiled faintly and said to the entire room, "Interesting concept, but maybe learn more about finance before stepping into the real arena." I stood frozen on stage, my face burning, heart sinking. That was the last time I ever pitched as a founder. After that, I shifted to consulting, behind the scenes. And now, the man who publicly humiliated me was about to marry my sister. At first, I thought it was a joke, but no, the invite was printed with real ink, a real date, a real venue. Magnolia Plantation isn't a place for pranks, it's a historic oceanfront estate known for high society southern weddings, the kind you see in luxury documentaries about the American dream. I set the invitation back on the table and sat down, my head spinning. This wasn't random. Charlotte knew I had met Benjamin. So did my mother. They knew the history, the pain, and they still sent it. No note, no "we'd love to see you," no "we hope you'll forgive us," just a cold invitation that felt more like a command. At first, I thought about tearing it in half, but then another thought crept in. Part of me wanted to understand why. Another part, the coldest part, realized they didn't want me there to reconcile. They wanted me there to witness, to be a silent bystander, a shadow in the back row, a reminder that I would always be the outsider. They forgot one thing: I'm not the same Abigail anymore. That night, I called Daniel. "Are you busy on June 18th? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's going on?" "I'm going to a wedding, and I might need someone to sit next to me so I don't throw a glass of wine in someone's face." He laughed, then went quiet. "Are you sure?" "I'm not going to offer congratulations," I said. "I'm going to look them in the eye and let them see I'm still standing." After the call, I opened my closet and took out the navy blue dress I'd never worn, fitted, deep V-neck, open back, elegant enough to avoid criticism, sharp enough to turn heads. I didn't need their approval. I needed them to see that I survived and that I wasn't afraid of anything anymore. My body was exhausted from a long day, but my mind was spinning like a rewound film reel. The closer the wedding came, the more I realized this wasn't just an invitation. Charlotte never did anything by accident. Every move she made was a chess piece she believed would win her the game. I got out of bed around 2 a.m., made a cup of ginger tea, and opened my laptop. The cold blue screen lit up the dark. I opened the Langley archive folder, a file I had created 3 years ago, then abandoned out of sheer exhaustion from fighting the past. I slowly scrolled through, opening one file at a time, fragments of old emails, original research drafts, photos I'd saved from events Charlotte attended. It was all still there, scattered like puzzle pieces that never formed a picture. This time was different. This time, I wasn't searching for fairness. I wanted the truth, and I was ready to turn over every stone to find what was buried beneath. I started with the plagiarized research paper. I found the original document I had emailed Charlotte with the file attached, date and time-stamped. A week later, she replied with the subject line, "Wow, you really should publish this." I saved that exchange. Then I dug into Charlotte's academic records. I accessed the database from our old university, where she'd supposedly completed her master's in applied psychology. To my surprise, there was no thesis under her name in the digital archives. Her name didn't appear on the list of students who defended their final thesis that year. I took a screenshot. My blood went cold. Next, I went to an anonymous blog I had discovered during my freshman year, a site that spread nasty rumors about female students. There was a series of posts focused on me back then. I suspected Charlotte but couldn't prove it. This time, I was more careful. I asked Daniel to help trace the IP address from the blog's hosting server. One of his software engineer friends tracked it to a device that had logged in from the offices of the Langley Family Foundation, where Charlotte once served as program director. I saved the technical confirmation, another link in the chain. But what truly chilled me was what I found when I began reviewing the Langley Family Foundation's financial activity. With access Daniel obtained from public records, we traced several suspicious payments listed to anonymous consultants. The recipient's name, Abigail Langley. The problem was, during that time, I was working part-time at a small counseling center and had no knowledge of any of it. The total came to over $60,000 in 4 years. I sat motionless for a long time. They had used my name to hide shady transactions. They created a fake persona of me as some phantom contributor while I was scraping by month to month. I could barely breathe as I opened the next file, a leaked medical report, source unknown, but complete with the logo and stamp of Coastal Health Clinic, where Charlotte had interned during her final year of graduate school. The report described a failed treatment that led to a 7-year-old boy being hospitalized due to a prescription error. The attending clinician listed, A. Langley. At the bottom of the internal investigation summary, the final line made my skin crawl, insufficient evidence of professional misconduct. Case closed per executive order from Director Margaret Langley. My mother. Again, my mother. I quietly closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. The truth was undeniable now. Charlotte hadn't just stolen my work. She had built an entire career on borrowed reputation, forged records, and the protection of my powerful mother. They thought I'd stay silent forever, that I'd never come back, never be strong enough to confront it. They were wrong. I opened the drawer and pulled out a yellow file envelope. On the front, I wrote in bold, steady pen, "For those who need to know the truth." This wasn't personal anymore. This was the truth, even if it brought the whole house of cards crashing down. The afternoon of June 18th, Charleston was glowing with sun. Magnolia Plantation stood against the deep blue sky like a perfectly staged play, white silk curtains fluttering in the breeze, violins echoing from the garden, guests informal were swirling like waves. They came to witness a dream wedding of the elite and had no idea they were about to see the truth unravel. I stepped out of the car, my heels tapping softly on the marble walkway. I wore the navy blue dress with the side slit, open back, modest neckline, not flashy, but impossible to ignore. The first pair of eyes to catch me belonged to the lobby manager. She hesitated slightly, then nodded. I wasn't an uninvited guest. I had RSVP'd. They couldn't stop me. Walking through the grand entrance, everything was staged like a showcase, white orchids draped over marble columns, crystal chandeliers sparkling, chairs arranged in a crescent around an aisle of silk and scented candles. Charlotte stood in the distance near the stage, in a fitted mermaid gown, her blonde curls perfectly styled. Next to her was Benjamin, still polished, still cold, just like I remembered. When I entered, the room didn't exactly fall silent, but the air shifted, fleeting glances, a few murmurs. Then Margaret's eyes met mine. There was a flicker in her gaze, lips pressed tight, but she said nothing. Still the same, always performing when she knew she had an audience. The ceremony moved quickly. No one objected, no one interrupted. But I hadn't come to say I object. I came to reveal. The reception followed in the back garden, soft jazz from the live band, champagne flutes passed around, laughter rippling through light conversation. I waited. I waited for the moment they raised their glasses to toast the bride and groom in thunderous applause. I stepped up to the podium just as the MC stepped down. No one stopped me. I took the mic, scanning the crowd. "Excuse me," I said, loud enough to be heard. "I have a few words about family, about reputation, and about the truth." The garden froze. Charlotte stood stiff. Benjamin frowned, stepping back. "I'm Abigail Langley, the bride's sister. Some of you may not have heard of me, and that's exactly why I'm here today." I pulled a folder from my bag and held it up. This is the original research paper Charlotte submitted to receive the 2016 Public Health Fellowship. But I wrote it. I have the original file, edit notes, and the email where she asked to take a look at the draft. I didn't need to shout. I just let each word drop like a stone in the still air. This is a copy of the university academic records showing Charlotte never submitted a graduate thesis. She doesn't have a valid degree. Charlotte stepped forward, her face pale, forcing a strange smile. "Sweetheart, maybe we can talk about this later." "I'm not done," I said, my voice low but sharp as steel. I turned to Benjamin. "Do you remember 2017, the summit in Atlanta? I was the presenter you laughed at for being out of my depth. And now you're marrying someone who built her reputation by copying and faking her way through everything." He stood frozen. Then I looked straight at Margaret. "And you, Margaret Langley, you thought I didn't know about the 2014 DNA test. I found the fake clinic you used to erase me from the family will. But that didn't make me disappear. You forgot, documents can be forged, but the truth can't." A glass shattered somewhere to the right. Benjamin turned to Charlotte, his face tightening. "Is what she's saying true?" His voice cracked. Charlotte said nothing, her lips pressed into a thin line. Margaret stepped forward, about to speak, but I held up my hand. "I didn't come here to argue. I came to put the truth back where it belongs." I set the mic down on the table and turned to leave. Behind me, the whispers rose like a wave. I didn't need to stay to see Benjamin pull his hand away from Charlotte or Margaret recoil like someone had thrown cold water on her. I didn't need to watch the carefully crafted image they spent their lives building start to crumble. I only needed one thing, release. And I got it, in a way none of them ever expected. Outside, the ocean breeze swept through my hair. I walked toward the sound of distant waves, shoulders back, steps steady, and never looked behind me. For the first time in years, I was free. 2 days after the wedding, life seemed to settle back into its usual rhythm, but I knew the storm was just beginning. That morning, I sat in my small apartment in Savannah, sunlight pouring through the window, a half-finished cup of coffee beside me, and my laptop open. I took a deep breath, then hit send. The first email went to 3 prominent health and education blogs, Health Watch Now, Scholarscope, and the Academic Mirror. Attached were copies of my original research, email exchanges with Charlotte, documentation of the plagiarism, incomplete academic records, and the patient file from the prescription error at Coastal Health Clinic. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. The truth spoke for itself. The second email went to the National Office of Academic Review, the agency overseeing federal degrees and scholarships. The third, I sent to the South Carolina State Office of Medical Licensing, responsible for issuing professional credentials for both Charlotte and my mother, Margaret. With each click of send, I felt another weight lift from my chest. I knew I was cracking the glossy finish my family had spent decades polishing, but I didn't regret it because that shine was built on pretense, deceit, and the scars they left on me. 3 days later, the leak began. On Tuesday evening, HealthWatch Now published an article titled "Plagiarism Concerns Emerge in Scholarship File of Charleston Charity Executive." Though the name wasn't explicitly mentioned, a blurry photo from a spring gala 2 years ago was enough for anyone in the industry to connect the dots. The next morning, the Academic Mirror ran a more detailed report. College of Charleston alum may have earned federal grant with plagiarized work. Charlotte's profile vanished from the Langley Family Foundation website. I checked her LinkedIn, completely wiped, no degrees, no awards, just vague filler descriptions. By Friday, the Langley Family Foundation homepage displayed an urgent notice: operations temporarily suspended for internal financial review. I laughed. They called it an internal review. I called it a full-scale collapse. Daniel texted me that afternoon: the financial report you provided was enough to open a federal investigation. You're about to see things move. And sure enough, by Monday morning, my mother's name, Margaret Langley, appeared on the preliminary investigation list by the Federal Audit Office for charitable fund mismanagement tied to fraudulent identity use. But it didn't stop there. While reviewing transactions connected to the Langley Family Foundation, investigators discovered an account under the name Abigail E. Langley had been used to legitimize expenses for fake conferences that never actually took place. They had used my name to build the perfect cover, and now that same name was pulling them into the light. A week later, my mother's medical license was temporarily suspended pending investigation. She was barred from overseeing any medical or non-profit organization. Charlotte remained silent, but according to a report from a friend of Daniel's, her academic file was now under review by the university. I didn't feel triumphant. There were no applause, no dramatic final scenes, just silence, the heavy kind that comes when a castle starts crumbling from its foundation. That night, I received a text from an unknown number: "You've gone too far. What do you think you're doing?" I didn't reply. I took a screenshot and sent it straight to Daniel. He wrote back: "The more pressure you get, the closer you are to the truth." A week later, the Charleston Post released a special investigative piece: "From Prestige to Scandal, Major State Charity Under Fire for Academic and Financial Misconduct." The article named not just Charlotte and Margaret but also a third figure, William Hayes, the foundation's deputy CFO and Margaret's ex-husband, my stepfather. I wasn't surprised. William had long been the man behind the numbers, never seen in public but the one with signature authority. And now he was the first to be formally asked to step down from all roles pending investigation. The house they built on glitter, names, money, and my silenced voice was now collapsing, layer by layer. I didn't need to stand there and watch it all fall. I just sat in my small apartment, sipped my tea, and held the paper I wrote when I was 21, my first study, the one that was stolen, now finally acknowledged. And I knew justice doesn't always come fast, but it always arrives on time. I was watering my balcony plants when I heard a knock, not rushed, but firm. I looked through the peephole. Margaret Langley stood there, shoulders squared, gray wool coat, face perfectly made up, like she had just walked out of a boardroom, even though that reputation now lay in ruins. I opened the door. She didn't speak right away, just looked at me with the same eyes that had once made me feel small 1,000 times as a child. "Come in," I said, stepping aside, though I already knew this wasn't a visit for reconciliation. She stepped in, her eyes scanning the apartment, not to admire, to judge. "Still simple as ever," she commented flatly, with no effort to hide the implication. I said nothing. I pulled out a chair for her. She didn't sit. "You've done enough, Abigail," she began, voice eerily calm. "You've turned this entire family into a public joke. Do you think this is right?" I set the watering can down, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and looked her in the eye. "I didn't do anything, Mom. I just stopped staying silent." Her eyes flickered, the first time during the visit I saw real hesitation. "You know Charlotte isn't perfect, but you didn't have to destroy everything just because you were jealous," she went on, her tone sharpening. "You always needed everything to revolve around you, and when it didn't, you attacked." I laughed softly but uncontrollably. "No, Mom. I just wanted a life where I didn't have to pretend. I wanted to be recognized for what I did, not for how well I played the obedient role." I stood up. "But you didn't want me. You wanted a daughter who bowed her head, and when I didn't do that, you erased me from everything." "I didn't," she started, but the sentence caught in her throat. "Don't say you didn't," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You faked a DNA test to strike me from the will. You let Charlotte use my name for fraudulent grants. You stood by while she stole my research and only acted when your reputation was on the line." She stayed silent. The apartment suddenly felt impossibly wide in the middle of that silence. "Do you want me to apologize?" she asked at last, breaking the stillness. I shook my head. "No, because I don't need it anymore." I opened the door. "You should go. You've got investigations to deal with, and me? I have a real life to live." Margaret Langley stood there for a moment. Her face no longer held that flawless pride it once did. She left without another word, her heels tapping lightly against the wood floor like the soft crack of a statue beginning to split. I closed the door, didn't lock it right away. I just stood there, leaning back against the wood, exhaling deeply, like letting go of a lifetime waiting for a confession and finally realizing I didn't need one anymore. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. "This is Evelyn Brooks. I used to be a nurse at Coastal Health Clinic. I don't know if you remember me." I froze. "Yes," I answered, heart pounding. I was on shift that day, the one where Charlotte gave the wrong dosage to that little boy. I saw her change the chart afterward. I wanted to speak up, but I got reassigned the following week. "I don't have hard proof, but if you need a statement, I'm willing." I was speechless. "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "You have no idea what that means to me." "I do," she replied, "because I was once someone they treated like I didn't exist, too." The call ended, but I remained still, feeling my heartbeat slowly return to normal. I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel the need to teach them a lesson. What needed to be said, I'd said. What needed to be revealed, I'd revealed. Now I just wanted to let go, not out of forgiveness, but because I no longer needed them to define who I was. The next morning, I woke up early. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a soft golden hue across the floor. I made coffee, played some light jazz, and stepped onto my balcony, where small lavender pots were blooming, reaching upward from the care of my own hands. 1 month after Margaret left my apartment, the last time I ever saw her, everything grew strangely quiet. No one knocked on my door. No more threatening messages, no apology from Charlotte, no letter from a family lawyer. No one tried to clarify or explain or control the damage. And oddly enough, that was exactly what I needed. There was no more anger left to hold, no more imaginary arguments in my head, no more dreams that jolted me awake at night with the weight of betrayal. I didn't need remorse. I didn't need anyone to bow and admit they were wrong because I had moved on. One Saturday afternoon, while reorganizing my bookshelf, I found an old USB drive where I had saved every document, every piece of evidence, every truth that had once been buried. I opened it, checked each file, not because I needed anything from it anymore, but because I needed to know I hadn't imagined it. I decided to do something I had never done before, share my story. I recorded a short video right there in my small kitchen, with natural light and no fancy edits. I didn't read from a script. I just spoke. My name is Abigail Langley, and if you're hearing this, maybe you've also been through what I went through, being ignored, pushed out, made invisible by your own family. I looked into the camera, calm in a way I never expected to be. I used to believe that if I stayed quiet enough, they'd forgive me. If I was good enough, they'd come back for me. But the truth is, some people don't want you to rise. They just want you silent so they can keep shining. I paused, took a breath. It took me years to learn this: you don't owe anyone your silence. You have the right to speak. You have the right to walk away. You have the right to build a new life, even if you never get an apology. I smiled, a real smile, not forced. They may never own up to their wrongs. They may never return. But that doesn't define who you are. Only you get to decide that. I ended the video with a simple line: live bigger than the limits they tried to put on you. I uploaded it to a small online forum where people shared stories about broken families. I didn't expect much, but within a week, there were hundreds of shares and thousands of comments. I'm the older sister in a family where my brother was always the center. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. I thought I was the only one who's ever been called a burden by my own mother. You gave me the courage to stop seeking acceptance from a place it never existed. Each comment was a reminder I wasn't alone, and I never had been the problem. I was just the one brave enough to step off the stage everyone else was scared to leave. I still live my simple life, my little apartment, my work at the community counseling center, and quiet weekends teaching restorative yoga for trauma survivors. I don't need a spotlight. I have the truth. One day after yoga class, an older woman came up to me. She gently took my hand, eyes glassy but smiling. "My daughter sent me your video." I hadn't spoken to her in almost 8 years, but after watching it, I called her. "Thank you." I placed my hand over hers and said, "It's never too late to listen." I don't know if Margaret ever watched the video or if Charlotte ever read any of the articles written about her. But it doesn't matter anymore because the life I'm living now is no longer tied to their gaze. It isn't ruled by someone else's approval. I was once forgotten, pushed aside, twisted into someone I wasn't. But now I'm free, and no one can take that away from me. So, if you're hearing me and you've been hurt, I want you to remember this: you don't need forgiveness to find peace. You just need to give yourself permission to begin again. And this time, start with the truth.